There is one word I can use to describe the new Mad Max film. I'll give you a clue. It begins with M. Mad Max Fury Road is a full-on action car chase film. Almost the entire movie is one massive car chase between various factions, and Max gets caught up in the middle of it, and the action sequences are great. This film, despite almost being pure action, remembers that there are times when you need to slow down so that the audience can get to know the characters. The supposed main character was Max, who according to the title is mad, but he seemed pretty non-mad to me. There were a whole host of characters in the film that were madder than he was. But still, Tom Hardy did give an excellent performance. One of the aforementioned madder than Max characters is the movie's main villain, who keeps wives as slaves and is generally not a very nice bloke. He also, for whatever reason, has a very similar logo to that of American pop-punk band The Offspring. Nicholas Holt's character Nux is by far the maddest character in the film, especially in the first act when the prospect of driving through a sandstorm appears to be the best day of his life. His character develops nicely throughout the film, and he ended up being my second favourite character. My favourite character was Furiosa, who was supposed to be the movie's secondary protagonist. However, most of the story pretty much revolves around her. Max just kind of gets in the way of her story, and he does spend a significant amount of the movie not doing anything much. Furiosa I found to be a much more interesting character, and I would say it really is her film. But maybe saying Furiosa doesn't quite have the same ring to it. All in all, a perfectly enjoyable movie with a fantastic supporting cast. I just wish that Max's role had been a little more prominent, and that Max had been as mad as the movie's title suggests. And speaking of things with M's and X's, the Matrix writers have done a TV show with Netflix, the trailer for which recently came out. Sense8 will be about 8 people from across the globe who become empathetically connected to one another. They gain each other's knowledge and skills, and are guided by a discount Mahinda from Heroes. In seriousness, the trailer does give off the feeling that it is quite similar in tone to the first series of Heroes, and it also feels a little bit like The Matrix, which makes sense because the Wachowski brothers did it, and both of those are very good things to have. This looks seriously cool, and I will definitely be watching it when it comes out. A trailer that wasn't so awe-inspiring was the one for Supergirl, which is basically horrible. The dialogue and situations in the trailer make it look like someone took the script for a chick flick, and a bad one at that, shoehorned Supergirl in there, and turned it into a TV show, effectively breaking DC's lucky streak of top quality television. Something that made up for this, however, was the Legends of Tomorrow trailer, where Rory Williams from Doctor Who bands the Flash, Green Arrow and other supporting characters from those two shows together in order to travel through time in order to stop a very dangerous villain. This show looks absolutely incredible and I cannot wait to see it. There was another film I couldn't wait to see, which I saw a few months back. Quite a small, not very well known film called Avengers Age of Ultron. So here's my somewhat belated review for that. This film was everything I wanted it to be. It took everything I didn't like from the first Avengers and did it perfectly. This film didn't just rely entirely on being the Avengers. Hawkeye became a character in this film. The story was interesting and the action scenes were well balanced with the more emotional scenes. The humour was great, as it always is with Joss Whedon, and Ultron was a phenomenal villain. He managed to be just as entertaining and charismatic as Loki, as well as being far more threatening. Also phenomenal were the new characters Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver and Vision. And for the record, I preferred the Age of Ultron Quicksilver to the Days of Future Past Quicksilver. I didn't see that coming. Paul Bettany also does a very great job of integrating himself into the fold, despite only being introduced in the third act. What I will say is the mid-credits scene felt very rushed, and it's probably the worst mid-credits sting so far. I also expected more seeds of tension to be sown between Tony Stark and Captain America to set up for Civil War, but at the end of film, Tony and Steve were still very much good friends. In addition, it is quite painfully obvious that some of the scenes with Thor are just in there to set up for Infinity Wars. All that aside, Avengers Age of Ultron was still a very awesome movie, far superior to the first Avengers. In fact, I think it's my favourite film to come out of the MCU so far. And since I'm talking about heroes, I should probably talk about how Brad Bird has announced that his next project after Tomorrowland will be The Incredibles 2, which can only mean one thing. Brad Bird is watching my YouTube videos. The Incredibles 2. Honestly, who doesn't want it to happen? Hi, Brad. Since everything I've ever seen by Brad Bird has been pure gold, and since The Incredibles is among my all-time favourite movies, I cannot contain my excitement about this film, even though we probably won't be seeing it until at least 2017. Speaking of sequels, I also managed to find myself in the theatre screening for Pitch Perfect 2 this week, which is not what I would class as my kind of film, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. For the most part, the story was good, the cast all delivered, and I'd say it was well directed. Unfortunately, this film isn't as funny as it could have been, with several jokes simply not having the right impact or feeling too forced. That being said, there were moments in there that did make me laugh, primarily during the parts at Becca's new job. I would really have liked to see more of that, but unfortunately that got relegated to the sidelines in favour of a few different subplots. All in all, I was still entertained by this film, so while I wouldn't exactly say it was pitch perfect, it was still pitched pretty okay. That's it for this episode of Big Screen Small Talk. As always, there are links to what I've been talking about in the description below, and if you've got an opinion on my opinions or just the things I've been talking about, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'll get to this later.